Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're heading back to 2018 to look at one of the most genuinely terrifying aviation events in recent memory, Air Astana Flight 1388. This is a wild story of mechanical failure, cascading human errors, and just sheer unbelievable grit. By the time we wrap this up, you'll see exactly how a totally routine flight turned into a frantic 2-hour battle for survival. Just imagine you're sitting in a regular commercial jet, an Embraer 190 to be exact, and out of nowhere you're hit with fighter jet level forces. We're talking massive gravitational loads here, slamming from positive 4.5 Gs all the way down to negative half a G. The aircraft is violently pitching, rolling, and literally flipping completely inverted at times. Commercial jets are absolutely not built to take that kind of aerodynamic punishment, and the craziest part? The folks on board had absolutely zero warning this was about to happen. That quote perfectly sums up the nightmare reality for the 3 pilots and 3 passengers, who actually were all airline employees themselves on this flight. Barely 30 seconds after lifting off from Portugal, they found themselves fighting a plane that was basically doing the exact opposite of what they told it to do. If they turned the yoke left, the plane would violently try to twist itself to the right. Section 1, the engineering paradox, a lethal hybrid flight system. So, to understand why this aircraft turned into an inescapable roller coaster, we really have to break down its flight mechanics. Now, you probably know that in modern aviation, fly-by-wire means a pilot's physical movements in the cockpit are essentially converted into electronic signals. Those signals go to a computer, which then physically moves the control surfaces outside. But here's the catch with the Embraer 190. It isn't totally fly-by-wire. To control its roll axis, so how the plane banks left or right, it actually uses a very specific hybrid setup. And right here is the absolute heart of the problem. The ailerons, those flaps on the outer trailing edges of the wings, are controlled by old-school physical stainless or carbon steel cables that run all the way from the cockpit. But the flight spoilers, which are the panels that pop up on top of the wing to disrupt lift and help force the plane to turn, those are completely modern fly-by-wire electronics. Ultimately, a major maintenance error ended up creating this terrifying high-speed tug-of-war on the wings. Because the physical cables for those ailerons were installed backwards, a command from the pilot to bank left meant the electronic spoilers correctly popped up to turn left, but the physical ailerons pushed hard to turn right. You literally had these two systems fighting each other at hundreds of miles per hour, making the aircraft completely unflyable. Section 2. The root cause. Let's flash back to Alverca de Ribatejo, Portugal. So how on earth does a modern commercial jet end up with backwards flight controls? Well, it started a month earlier in Portugal, and it's a textbook example of the Swiss cheese model of failure. A contracted maintenance crew was doing an upgrade on the aileron cables, but the manuals they were given lacked clear graphics and were frankly incredibly confusing. Because of this, they accidentally installed the cables completely crossed. When they ran a system test, a massive flight control no dispatch error blared at them. But, and this is wild, under immense pressure to just get the job done, instead of physically going back and checking those cables, the mechanics cleared the electronic error by swapping out the flight control computer modules. The screen warning vanished, yeah, but that lethal physical mistake was still sitting right there in the wings. And unfortunately, the pilots themselves ended up missing that final slice of Swiss cheese. When the Air Astana crew arrived for the flight, the weather was just miserable. We're talking heavy rain, super low visibility. They actually rejected the plane initially for some other minor issues. When they finally came back 2 hours later to do their taxi-out checks, they were rushed. In the Embraer, you move the yoke and watch a digital screen to make sure the surfaces outside are moving correctly. Well, in the rush and the bad weather, they missed the backwards aileron movement on their screens. That one little oversight set the stage for disaster just 30 seconds after they left the runway. Section 3, surviving the unflyable. 2 hours of sheer terror in the skies. Jumping back into that chaotic cockpit, the crew is frantically declaring a mayday. The autopilot absolutely refuses to engage, and the plane is just violently pitching and rolling. To make things worse, they have zero warning indicators or computer messages telling them why their own plane is essentially attacking them. At one terrifying point, the plane was diving toward the Earth at a staggering minus 16,000 feet per minute. It got so desperate that if you listen to the air traffic control recordings, you can actually hear the crew begging for radar vectors out over the ocean. They wanted to ditch the plane in the water, partly to increase their own razor-thin chances of survival, but mostly to make sure they didn't crash into a populated city. But then, in a genuinely brilliant moment of troubleshooting, literally just 1 minute after the first major upset, the crew switched the plane's computer from normal law over to direct law. Now, in normal law, a computer sits between the pilot and the wings, interpreting the inputs. But in direct law, you bypass that computer entirely. The pilot's hands are speaking directly to the control surfaces. This move was an absolute game changer. By switching to direct law, the crew actually managed to create a dead band that deactivated those conflicting electronic spoilers. So now, only the backwards ailerons were moving. Think about that. It was completely counterintuitive. If you want to go right, you have to steer left, but at least it was consistently counterintuitive, right? They also made the smart call to keep the flaps at position 1, giving them just a tiny bit more aerodynamic wiggle room. And you can't overlook the crew resource management here. A 26-year-old off-duty pilot sitting in the jump seat became absolutely critical. He stayed calm and relayed technical advice while the 40-year-old captain was literally physically wrestling the yoke. Section 4, the final verdict. An impossible landing and a lot of shared blame. Let's look at how this crazy 2-hour nightmare finally wrapped up once they wrestled the aircraft into a fragile sort of control. About an hour and 15 minutes in, a pair of Portuguese F-16 fighter jets intercepted them to guide them toward better weather. But then, the F-16s forgot to turn off their transponders. This accidentally triggered blaring collision alarms inside the already chaotic Embraer cockpit. Can you imagine? By the time they finally reached the Beja airbase, the first officer was so physically exhausted from fighting the controls that the captain actually had to swap him out for the jump seat pilot mid-flight. After failing 2 highly unstable approaches, the captain spotted a narrower alternate runway, runway 19 left, and miraculously, he managed to put the plane down. Astoundingly, everyone survived. Just one passenger walked away with a minor sprained ankle. But the aircraft itself? It was completely destroyed by those extreme G-forces. The wings and the aluminum skin were wrinkled way, way beyond their design limits. And in a moment of just bitter, incredible irony, as soon as the wheels safely rolled to a stop on the tarmac, that ominous flight control no dispatch error finally popped back up on their screens. The plane was a total write-off. When the official investigation concluded, they handed out blame across pretty much the entire aviation ecosystem. The maintenance firm was cited for a deficient safety culture. Embraer's manuals were called out for being undeniably confusing. Air Astana hadn't adequately trained their crews for post-maintenance acceptance flights. And yes, the pilots did miss that critical visual check before takeoff. But even with all those cascading errors, the final verdict made one thing very clear. Without this specific crew's absolute grit, real-time troubleshooting, and flawless teamwork, this would have definitely been a catastrophic tragedy. Which really leaves us with a chilling thought. How often do mundane administrative oversights, or just a poorly drawn manual in a maintenance hangar somewhere, end up putting human lives on the line at 30,000 feet? It's a stark reminder that true flight safety doesn't just begin in the cockpit. It starts long, long before the engines are ever turned on. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the systems around you.